So we all know that China has been maintained a very high growth rate for almost 4 decades. Okay, start from 1978. But over this time period, we have been, so in the time 1978, 1/3 of the population was in poverty, and 75% of the population was living in the rural areas. And nowadays, we alleviate all the people out of poverty, and now almost 70% of the population living in the urban areas. It's a great achievement that we have been made. And if you think about the drivers of this rapid growth period, I would say for the initial 3 or 4 decades, the main drivers were due to this high saving rate, which drives the high investment rate in China. Therefore, we can finance the investment using our own savings and upgrade our manufacturing sector gradually. And the rest of the contribution of the economic growth is due to the technological improvement or innovation in technology. If you look at the growth decomposition, if we can decompose this growth into these 2 parts, one is from the increase of the inputs in the production side, say capital, labor, or land. The rest would go to the innovation part. What we see in China is that over the past 10 years, we have seen a declined contribution of technology to economic growth. And we ask why that, what happens to the decline contribution of the technology? Well, the reason is that as you coming from a lower income country to a middle high income countries, initially you can learn technology from the developed ones. And that can easily increase your technological frontier of the country. But as you approach to the middle high income countries, as you directly compete with many developed countries in the world, it's getting very harder to continue to innovate. Therefore, the future economic growth of China will rely on the prospect whether we can continue to innovate like before. Okay, that's the idea of high quality development in China, that we would like to emphasize more and more on the innovations in the future. And if you look at the historical development experience of China, well, we know Rome was not built in one day. And for China, now we can build these very advanced new energy cars and export, and because one of the largest car exporters in the world. And in the past 4 decades, we gradually learned how to innovate. We don't make it in one day. As a matter of fact, in the beginning, when China participates in the world trade market, we don't have the combined advantage to create of the technology. What we do is we start with so-called processing trade. Many of you may not know the word, may already know the term processing trade, which describes the following way of trade, that we import the key parts or intermediate input from other countries when we just assemble it, and then we export it to the rest part of the world. If you look into the value chain of this kind of production, we only focus on a small part of the value chain. But because we have abundance of labor, therefore we take chance of this cheaper labor cost, and we participate initially in the world trade market, in the world trade process. But then gradually we learn from our, say, the suppliers, and we learn how we can make these intermediate inputs ourselves. And we gradually upgrade our manufacturing sectors. We adopted so-called export orientation policy, that we, instead of protecting the firms who are producing the same as the foreign suppliers, we try to encourage the local producers with the help of these suppliers from the rest of the world, and we help them to export. The government help them to use their industrial policy to help them to export to the rest part of the world. You know, these two strategies would imply a total different outcome. Some countries adapted the similar import substitution policy, but it's very hard for them to make these firms to produce efficiently. But if you encourage this firm to participate in the world market, then they have to be enough competitive in order to get market share. And that's the difference. So by this combination of the market and the government, we gradually upgrade our manufacturing sector and upgrade our technological level. And I think that is the key lessons for China in the past several decades, that we improve our technological frontier and bring it closer to the world frontier. And if you think about who will be the innovators, okay? Think about it's not the government, not the universities. The main drivers of these innovations actually is the market, is the firms who are the main contributors of these innovations. And now what is the role of the government? Okay, if the government just let it alone? No, the government makes sure, first of all, to provide a better business environment for the firms, so that they can have no barriers to entry the market. Okay, then they can use their advantage and use their resources to make more R&D investment in the firms. And the government can do more than that. In China, the government, they participate some of the process of innovation. We know that innovation is very risky. The firms, as a single firms, it's very hard for them to make a decision to innovate. But once they innovate, there is a chance to fail. So the role of the government was to provide a better environment for the firms to innovate by setting up a better financial market. So there are more investors can finance these startup firms by set up some of the local governments set up their own fund, the government-guided fund, to provide more resources to the firms when the market can fail in some cases. So that's why China, with the help of the private sectors, China now ranked the 10th in the World Innovation Index. And our total input of the innovations as measured by their R&D investment account for like 3% of the GDP in 2023 now. And China was ranked the world top 1 in terms of the amount of patent applications. We also specialized in some of the industrial sectors. Here, this is just an overview of the sectors that now the Chinese firms, they have invested in. You can see there, compared to other Western developed economies, now we have more and more common in terms of the sectors we highlight, we focus on. This graph I would like to stay a few seconds. This is the trade share accounted by different countries in the world over time. So the first you can pay attention to is this blue dotted line, which denotes the world trade share of the United States. It started very high after World War II, after the end of the World War II, and it declined dramatically over time. And it was replaced by Germany and Japan, which shown in the graph, which is the blue curve and the yellow curve. Their market share, their trade share in the world market actually surpassed the United States in the 1980s, and they become the world major traders for the goods and services. China was denoted by the red line. It's gradually catch up, and now it becomes the largest exporters in the world. Okay, what we call these patterns in economic development is so-called flying geese patterns. It was actually coined by this Japanese economist 100 years ago, talking about their trade structures can evolve over time. So a country, when it participates in the international trade, it first just import, but then it gradually to learn how to produce and upgrade its manufacturing productions, and then gradually become the world leading exporters. But there is a condition which kind of country can take the advantage of these patterns. And you can see the reason why China can succeed in becoming the world's largest exporters does not mean the other countries can easily copy these patterns. My personal opinions, based on my description, is that innovation is very important. But there is a big innovations and small innovations. We have to start with the smaller one and gradually learn and how to become and make radical innovations in the end. And that's the key for this. For one country, if they really want to participate in the world global chain, they would like to think about how they can upgrade their manufacturing sector by gradually learning from the production. And these figures show you the two very important variables for China. One is the inward FDI. In the beginning of the open up, on one hand, we participate in the processing trade. On the other hand, we adopt this market for technology policies for the FDI. We attract the foreign investors, and we know they have a better technology than ours. And what we can learn from them, well, we ask them to invest directly in China, for example, to set up a car production line. And we would like to, hopefully, we can learn from the cooperation with them. And what we can offer these foreign investors, we have a big, deep domestic market, okay? But, you know, after 30 years or 40 years of inward FDI, now we learn how to make the manual automobiles ourselves. And we become the largest exporters of the cars in the world, okay? And the blue line actually denotes the outward FDI of China. Now, more and more Chinese investors invest abroad and at a high speed than the inward FDI. And the implications, why I'm talking about this, because we are now sitting in South Africa, and we see a great opportunity for all the African countries, and we also see this picture. You know, not a single country can dominate in this largest trade share for a very long time. They are going to be followers. And I do think about their great potential for African countries to become the next continent of the great manufacturing hub. And in order to do that, I think the African countries should all need what you need to do is, well, follow the lessons. Maybe we can learn some lessons from China based on our industrial process, and how the African countries can supply a better environment for the companies to adapt this, or for the government to adapt this export orientation policy, encourage the local firms to build their own capacities to manufacture the goods. That is I think the great opportunity given that a lot of Chinese firms and they're moving abroad. And this is a picture of China about in terms of the industrialization. China, we know it's an industrialized country, but in the beginning, we're starting from our industrialization rate was very low. Actually, these two lines, the red dot, denotes the path of China's industrial share over time. And at the very lower level of GDP level, you can see our industrial share is very low. But we quickly move up. And before we open up, actually we already have a very good infrastructure. We have a very good potential for manufacturing goods. And at the time of 2012, our manufacturing sector reached a peak. Not about 45% of our GDP was due to the secondary industry. And also the employment of the manufacturing sector account for like 50% of the total employment in China. But then after we reached the peak, now the service sector become the dominating sector in China. So you may still think about, well, China is the largest exporter in the world. But I think due to the economic regularities, our economic structure is going to change. And the decline of the manufacturing sector is accompanied by more and more investors coming from China to the rest of the world. It also implies more opportunities for the countries like African countries. They have the opportunity to increase their own manufacturing productions. Okay, so to conclude, I think it's what's faced in front of China is how we can maintain being innovative and continue to grow at a relatively high speed as before. But it also implied a great opportunity for countries like African countries that we can work together and help the African countries build their own manufacture capacity and to also bring more technologies to African countries. Thank you.
Okay, so let's engage